And we are live. Hello, my lovelies. I hope you're well. Today we'll be talking about pet ownership and possibly insect eating if things get spicy. And today we have BlueMorpho.
Hello.
Her stance is that you should only own an animal if they have no option of surviving in the wild. Rescue should only be acceptable, and breeding should not occur under any circumstances. And then we also have Thunder Bay personal trainer LoganBlake, who's against pet ownership in almost every case. So I'll start with you, Logan. Why do you think this discussion is even worth having within veganism?
I think a lot of vegans, just in general, from posting on Facebook today, that most vegans don't even want to discuss it, and it's like a lot of cognitive dissonance that it's just something that a lot of people believed that all forms of pet ownership, like no matter what, is perfectly fine. And then also, like, even if they've shifted over to, oh, only rescuing animals is good, there's a lot of negative things that go along with that too that they don't want to discuss either. And some people were getting so mad today that they just unfriended me just for asking the question, um, you know, does anybody want to debate pet ownership? And people are just getting so heated just based off that question. It goes to show like it's a serious topic that people should be talking about.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few comments coming out. Good job on the marathon, bud, said Liam. Wavy Cub says, woo! Thaddeus says, I am here.
That's what he says every time.
He says that every time. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
okay.
I would say, before I ask Blue the same question, I would say this is the defining debate that really shows the difference between the vegan animal lovers and maybe the vegan realists, possibly. Maybe that's showing my bias. I'm not sure. But Blue, what do you think? Why is this an important discussion to have?
Well, it just I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but it reminds me of this whole thing where Jenna Marbles, in case you didn't know, she's apparently vegan. She went and bought a whole bunch of fish from a pet store and then got a tank for them. And then freaked out, brought the fish back, and made a video on how she got the wrong tank. And I'm thinking through all of this, the problem isn't that you got the wrong tank. The problem is that you got fish in the first place. So I think it's an important conversation to have because I'm hoping to be convinced otherwise, but at least getting pets from a pet store is wrong. I'm not sure about just having pets in general. I wouldn't even call them pets, but goodness.
Yeah, no, I mean, breeding itself, I believe last time I looked, it caused, I think, 2.9 million deaths in the US alone, as in through euthanasia.
Yeah,
too many animals being bred. Yeah.
So I mean, I think that even one animal being bred is too many because I would not want to be forced bred so that people could play with my children.
So this is an interesting question, actually. This was brought up within the squad. Some people believe in, say, service animals. I know, Blue, you do not believe in service animals. Is that true to say? You don't believe in them? Or you said something along the lines, had to be convinced otherwise?
I want to be convinced otherwise on it because I don't know. There's a lot of helpful things that animals are able to do, like what you pointed out about detecting seizures and sniffing bombs and stuff that I've pretty much forgotten about. But otherwise, you can just hire a human to do most of the things that people are making dogs do for them.
Logan, what do you think about that? Oh, sorry, Blue, carry on.
Oh, it's really quick. There are pragmatic issues with ending people having service dogs as well. I wouldn't say make them give up their service dogs. If the training is already done for, then just go ahead and keep on having your dog companion, but don't introduce any new service dogs.
Okay, and what about you, Logan? What do you think about, say, service animals?
Getting an animal to do any sort of job for you is exploitation and is immoral.
You would even say so for, say, for example, there are dogs who can detect seizures in people. So what they do is a few seconds before the seizure actually happens, the dog alerts the person and brings them to the ground, so that when they actually have the seizure, they don't end up, so many of the seizures that cause damage are through people falling. It's not the actual seizure itself. So what would you say to something like that, where maybe a human can't detect it, or technology would be expensive? What would you say?
Well, I mean, if you were to apply anything to the human form, would it be moral for you to have a human, without asking him, follow around? Like,
Exactly.
let's say you had a mute human, right, that couldn't answer your questions. To just assume that that person wants to follow you around and wait until you have a seizure without knowing a definitive yes or no seems immoral.
Yeah, I don't know though. That seems like a kind of simplistic way of like dealing with it. Because when you look at dogs, I mean, for me, for example, I would not own a dog ever again. I don't think, say, unless I had a huge house, I lived with like loads of people, had loads of other animals to stimulate these animals, so they had plenty of friends and company. So I think in an environment where we go to work, where we leave the house, where they don't have, maybe it's a single dog, I think either way it's going to be something that the dog will suffer from boredom or stress. What is that clicking sound?
Oh,
Is that
I'm
you?
sorry. I'm making clay charms and I have to do something to the wire. It's making that noise. I can mute myself if you
If that's
want.
okay, sorry. Yeah, it's just
Yeah, it's fine.
just to try. But yeah, no. Where was I? What was I saying? Oh yeah. So like, I'm of the stance that I wouldn't feel comfortable looking after a dog unless I had loads of people around me with them constantly, and there were other dogs for these animals. But do you not think that there is something valuable between a human person relationship, and especially say in one of these relationships where the person is blind or they have suffered from seizures? You see this relationship where they are permanently together. It's not a case of this person leaves for work. When it's a service animal, they are constantly with them. And I don't know. I see a bond there that isn't just a case of, oh, they're just sitting around waiting for the person to have a seizure. I think maybe that's simplifying it. What do you think?
Well, you're guessing. First of all, you're guessing that there's a bond, right? You don't know. Like I mentioned earlier, you have no idea what the animal's actually thinking at any given second of the day. You're just assuming that the animal wants to be with you at every single second. If you're going to go by veganism, like veganism is supposed to be ethical. What's the definition of veganism? So we look at veganism. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude as far as possible and practicable all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any purpose, right? So there's two definitions of exploitation. The one that you don't use is the action of making use of and benefiting from resources. That doesn't seem to apply. But the one that people use is the action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. So you're benefiting from the animal's work, whatever service they're doing for you. But what is the benefit to the animal? You don't know if they're enjoying it. So there's no benefit to them.
Okay, I'll take some comments from the chat. Thaddeus says, start taking measurements of seizures for AIs. I would say that's a great idea, but the question is that affordable currently? Maybe it would be affordable in the future. What do you think? Should there be AI, guys, for seizures, things that come in place? And do you think it would be an affordable thing for people, who are disabled? People with disabilities, for example, they do suffer from low income from a large proportion. I could get up the number if you're interested, but what do you think? Does it need to be AI instead?
I think that it should be, and I also wanted to point out that like cost isn't necessarily an argument. Something like if veganism was however more expensive than being non-vegan, if we could pay for it somehow, like if it was possible somehow, then it'd still be our obligation to do that instead. Just put it in the human context.
Yeah, well, I would say cost could be an argument with say you went blind tomorrow and you couldn't afford, like, that's not a worry of mine.
It's a pragmatic argument, not a principled argument, right?
I just think when it comes to disabilities, for example, I mean, I know we're using something that's like, it's not as big an issue as pet ownership in general, but I would say when it comes to something like that, the principled argument will always be the larger one, because when you're dealing with things like blindness, with seizures, it's just like, can we be pragmatic about that? You know, once you experience that, I don't know. But to go over another comment, I saw one. Wavy Carb said, service animal not optimal, band-aid over issue. Optimal would be accessible tech. Service pets are a temporary solution, but not optimal. And the drunk vegan, who's now that was Vohan. Thank you for the name change, Vohan. I think it suits him. What do you think? Putting it in the human context, it would be someone who absolutely loves you, therefore not slippery. And yeah, I with dogs, I think they're very different, because you can tell when a dog doesn't like someone very clearly, and it's very rare that a dog doesn't like someone. Dogs are very different from humans. They're just very, you know, they're known for being very loving. I know you can't tell if a dog really loves you, but
well, you can measure something going on in their brain, like some sort of brain activity, to tell if they're happy. Like, there's ways of knowing whether somebody is happy without them telling you. Body language and measuring certain things in their brain. I don't know too much about it, but like, it's not just a guess. Like, it's more of an educated one, but it's still not definitive. This dog loves me and would or not want anything else in their life and whatever, you know?
Well, Etherlogic asks Logan a question. How does Logan know his kids want to stay in his house? Kids are legally incapable of consent. Are his kids enslaved? What do you say, Logan?
So there's a couple things there. So being able to tell if animals are happy at certain moments doesn't really mean anything, because I mean, there's the idea of, like, say that movie The Room, where somebody's born in a room, and the idea of like being institutionalized, or like what's that other thing where it's like something syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, like that all those things. Like, you could hold on, you could still be happy if you're in a situation that isn't optimal. And just like, say, animal agriculture, right? Like, so I've heard the argument 100 times. How do you know that the animals aren't happy in animal agriculture and this and that? And I'm sure there is times, you know, with grass-fed cows, chickens, whatever, that they are happy. Now, does that mean that's an optimal situation for them to be in? Just because at a certain moment, maybe they're attached to you, maybe like they've just become used to you because you're the only person there, you're the person that's feeding them. That doesn't mean that that's where they should be, just based off seeing that they're happy at certain moments. Kids are different. So how kids work, right? I mean, obviously all animals are in charge of their kids. And if you do something stupid to your kids, right? If you mistreat your kids and you're just a complete scumbag, like, there's almost like a karma thing that goes on. Obviously, like, karma, you know, not in the true sense of like, if you do something bad's going to happen to you. Like, not exactly like that. But let's say you treat your kid like complete jerks, right? And then they grow up, you're old and frail, they're going to treat you like a complete jerk. It's going to come back around. And there's a lot more things involved when you have kids than just me looking after an animal. Like, the dog's not going to grow up and potentially take care of me, or, you know, also I could talk to my kids and reason with them and see what's going on in their heads, like, as they're growing, and, you know, how they respond to things by telling me about it. You can't get that from dogs or animals. So there's way more stuff that goes into to having kids. Most of it comes from being able to talk to them.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, go on.
But what about a kid that couldn't communicate with you? Like you were saying earlier about a mute person that can't tell you whether or not they want to do something or be somewhere, and that animals are like these mute people in a sense. Does that make
Okay,
it okay
so
to have a child in your house
no.
by your
Okay,
logic?
so you're talking about like a handicapped kid. So a kid who can't do any form of communication, like they wouldn't even be able to write things down or anything, like a vegetable, basically,
Yeah,
right?
they have like
It's
a
like,
gammy hand and stuff.
yeah. So I mean that's obviously an extreme case. We're not talking black and white like pet ownership, like is either you have a dog or you don't. We're talking about like an extreme case where someone's an absolute vegetable, and it's going to be hard to do anything. What's the other option? Like you can't, like animals come from animal parents, right? Where did the human kid come from? It came from you. It's not like you should be, you know, there's no other option besides you to take care of your vegetable kid.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. If you take that into the same context of an animal that doesn't have a parent, doesn't have any means of surviving out in the wild or living a life independently, then why is it not okay to provide assistance to that animal?
Well, they didn't come out of your vagina, so it's kind of weird. Like, where did they come from initially, right? Like, you had to get them from somewhere. Like, they didn't just fall in your lap, right? So, like, the kid
Right.
fell in your lap. If the kid comes out a vegetable, it's like I'm stuck with this vegetable kid. But where the heck did like the dog come from? You had to take it from somewhere, and that's the unethical part.
Oh, so the unethical part isn't you actually having the pet, it's taking it from its parent.
Well, that's like one aspect. There's a whole bunch of unethical parts to it. One aspect is you taking it from their parents. Yeah.
Yeah. What if you were to have like a family of animals that were all together, but they couldn't take care of themselves on their own?
Why would you have a family of animals to begin with? Where would they come from? Where are you getting the
They
family
just
of animals
happen.
from?
You don't
What,
breed them.
like, well, they just walked in your house. You left the door open, and a family of animals walks in. Like, where do they come from? I don't get it.
My question to you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you Logan said that in almost any circumstance you wouldn't be for, sorry, that's me, I think. You wouldn't be for the ownership of pets even if rescue. So what would you say?
Yeah.
Would you say it's immoral to leave the animals who need to be rescued? Like, what would your plan be? Would you say nobody rescue, nobody purchase, leave them, and let's
Which
just...
ones? Like they could be rescued from anywhere though. So like where? You can't just say
So,
all.
say for
So like
example,
like where would they be rescued from?
so we're talking maybe previously owned pets who have been given up. We're talking ones that have been in puppy mills. You're talking everywhere they come from, and we're talking a rescue center. I don't know. You surely have them in Canada, right? Like what they call like animal. Yeah. Like, would you say just don't rescue them and just kind of like
Well,
maybe
let me
euthanize them? What
answer
would you
that. So
say?
you said a shelter? So you're saying a shelter,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like
that's
an
the word I'm
animal
looking for. A
shelter?
shelter. Yeah, that was the bloody word.
Okay. So they make money off of animals, right?
Well, I don't know if they actually
At a
make
shelter.
money. I think they, like, my friend, she volunteered at the shelter, and they were barely making a lot of the time. Usually, the money that goes to the animal has gone towards all the shots that the animals had to have, all the care. Like, I don't think they make any money. It's them getting money to
I'm
sustain
almost
themselves.
100% sure. I'm almost 100% sure that at any shelter, there's going to be people making money who own at non-profit places. There's people who it's like a business.
True, yeah.
They make money.
You have a few like people, who do make money, yeah.
So is it ethical to be paying somebody to make money off of animals?
I suppose it depends on I would say it depends on what you're doing with them. Like, if you're trying to save a species,
animals, the definition of exploiting animals is like having animals for your own benefit.
But the thing is, when you make money from something, it might be for your own benefit, but if in some cases it literally might just be a case of I need to make this money so I can continue doing this.
And
If
not
you,
just
if
that,
you don't
but
make that if you don't make that money, say if you were a full-time activist, okay, so people like Joey Carbstrong who get given money, if they didn't have the money and they had to work, they wouldn't be able to continue doing those things. I wouldn't say it's exploitative if you're rescuing animals, you're looking after animals constantly and you're getting paid to do it. I wouldn't say it's exploiting them from making money from them. I would say it's just giving you an option to be able to continue to do it because you need money.
Okay, so
but I get where you're coming from. I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah, so that's one of them. One of my arguments
can I
is
say
that...
what I was going to say before real quick?
Oh yeah, sorry, Blue. Yeah,
Sure,
you go and then Logan.
I was gonna say, if you just throw it into the human context, if an orphanage makes money when they get children adopted out, does that make the orphanage unethical?
That's a good point. Yeah, go Logan.
Yeah, is an optimal environment for an animal in a building would be one argument, because all these animals are in buildings, right? So I mean that's one factor that's bad. Another factor I was going to say is that somebody's always making money. Like there's going to be, I know there's, I've been to the Humane Society here and everything. I know there's people who volunteer there, but there is people making money, and then there's also side organizations and government and all these other people making money off it. So a lot of people are making money off of nonprofit organizations, and a lot of it isn't just for maintenance or things like that. So I mean, in the rare case that everybody's volunteering and it's completely free and nice, yeah, okay, that might be fine. But then there's other issues too. Is how well are they getting treated? Can you make sure that they're getting well treated? Like that's like saying, how can you monitor? How can you monitor that they're getting well treated? Another thing is how when people say, get your pets spayed or neutered, right?
Oh, that's fucked up.
You put that in the human context. Did you ask the animal before you could cut its nuts off? Are these shelters are literally cutting private parts off of living beings and without consent, and that's fine? There's so many issues that go into it besides just, it's like an orphanage. You're not cutting the nuts off of kids in an orphanage, right?
No, but I want to go off of that and just say, if we put these people in the animals position, they can't stop breeding. There's no way to reason with them, and their kids are just going to live a terrible life. They're going to live a terrible life, and it's just going to be a net negative. Then I would support doing something like that.
So, I think
I still think it's fucked up, but as a pragmatic thing, it's going to cause more suffering not to do that. And I agree with you on a principled argument that we shouldn't have pets, but if it's the best thing for an animal to not be starving out on the streets and freezing to death and all this shit, then why would we allow that to happen?
One of the things one of the things about animal agriculture too that makes animal agriculture unethical is the animals are kept as slaves and then they're killed, right? So that's exactly what goes on in an animal shelter. I believe it's over 70% of animals are killed in animal shelters. So they're kept as slaves and then they're killed. I
don't support kill shelters though. I don't support kill shelters rather.
Okay, no, but from what I was just looking at, that's the statistics of overall in shelters. Over 70% of them are killed. So the other option is what? Release them into the wild? What's the other option? The no-kill shelter?
To bring them into people's homes and to stop them from breeding.
But then they're going to fill up, right? Don't they fill up pretty fast?
Can I just ask? Some people in the chat are clearly wanting to join the stream. Is this something that I
Probably
can open
Tim.
up to more people? Like,
Probably Tim, right?
Wavy-
Can we
Wavy-
that
can we
pet
wait a little
bastard.
bit before we do that?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, it looks like Wavy wants to join when it's open. Chris is asking, possibly. He's saying, should we all be on the stream?
I'm gonna leave if it becomes a shit show with people yelling at each other. I was only planning on talking to Logan.
Yeah. I mean, we'll just keep it us two at first, but then, I mean, later on, you know, when it dies down, then we'll bring people in. I think I had a conversation actually with Chris before, and me and him agree on a lot of things. But
okay,
yeah, he's in
all right.
He's in one of the early pet ownership debates.
Okay. All right, that's okay then. So, guys, in the chat, we will open it up later on. We'll just keep it down for a bit, and you can all kind of like gather your thoughts, and then we'll allow an explosion at the end. He's gonna yell at everyone. Tim, don't. I hate it when you yell. Like...
I wanted to address something
questions?
that you said earlier.
Okay. Yeah. So,
sure.
Blue, address, and then Logan, questions.
Awesome.
Okay.
So, is not getting a pet from the shelter going to help decrease the population of pets in the shelter?
Is not getting a pet from the shelter.
No, that's to Logan.
Oh,
or
sorry.
to you.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, wait. Is not getting a pet from a shelter going to decrease the amount of pets in the shelter?
Mm-hmm.
One of my overall things that I talked about with Tim is the idea of sending a message. So it's like, say a waiter brings you food, right? It's like you can take the food, right, and eat it, and then you're not wasting, right? And I know this is a live animal, but this is just like the concept of this to me is like, if people are continuously adopting pets and being like almost bailouts, they're like bailouts for these they're businesses. These shelters are businesses. All these things are businesses, and they're bailing them out, right? They're almost virtue signaling businesses too, right? And then you're bailing them out by getting the animals, right? If nobody was bailing them out and the animals were just all getting killed and all this and that, I think that it would end a lot quicker than it is right now, right? People would notice that, oh, all these animals are just getting killed. The government would see because people would be complaining about it so much, and they would probably find a different way, put an end to it, maybe hammer down on breeders a lot more, because breeders are the root problem, right? So if they hammer down on breeders and pet stores and all these things a lot more, then I think it would die down a lot faster, and there would be less and less pets to be adopted if the government got involved and more people got involved instead of just bailing them out all the time, right? So it's like continued suffering over long periods of time, or just everybody puts their foot down at once and is like, let's deal with this now. Let's just, it's kind of like, it's also the idea of too, like the world isn't going to go vegan overnight, but let's, one by one start cracking down on this and stand up and start, sending a message out.
But it still doesn't make it ethical to let an animal rot in a shelter. I just try to think of it on an individual level. Like if I were that animal and I were rotting away in my own shit in a shelter, would I want somebody to come and take me out of that place? And
okay,
I
so
probably
that's kind of
would.
That's kind of like telling somebody to do something, right? Like, so that's the idea of like you could tell me don't kill animals. I won't kill animals. But to tell me that I have to go adopt animals, I don't have to do that. And it's not immoral or anything like that.
It's not immoral not to. It's not immoral not to, but I think that it's a virtuous thing to do it, to give an animal a home. I mean, your alternative is letting them die, so.
Well, there is a lot of immoral things that go with it. So it's not immoral for me to do nothing, but it's immoral for you to support somebody who's exploiting animals, who either you or them have to chop their nuts off. That's immoral. And then for what was my third point? I forgot already. I'll get back to that. So yeah, I mean, you're paying people to exploit animals. Like there's going to be somebody that you're also going to have to pay. Even if you pay the vet, you're paying them to exploit animals. They're making money off literally mutilating animals' genitals, and you're having to pay for that, right? Oh yeah, the third thing I was going to say, if it's an animal that eats any sort of meat, now you're also supporting animal agriculture. So there's tons of immoral things that there's going to be involved with you getting a pet.
Were there questions that you wanted to ask, or could I go back to some points?
So what's the difference? Would you support, like, say, a zoo?
Nope.
No. So would you support an animal sanctuary?
I would.
So what's the difference between a zoo and an animal sanctuary?
Well, zoos breed animals. They take them out of their natural habitat when they don't need to be taken out of their natural habitat. So for like no medically necessary reason, like they're not dying, their legs aren't broken, whatever. And sanctuaries exist for animals that can't go back into their natural habitat. So we're kind of like taking our better judgment and saying we're going to take care of this animal. Like pigs and goats and cows and animals that probably wouldn't be able to survive on their own. Also because they've been kept in these animal agriculture type practices for so long, they probably have already lost their natural instinct to go survive out in the wild. But when you take an animal like an elephant out of the safari or whatever, and you put them into confinement, and there's no reason for it, it's not in the best interest of the animal, and you're making a profit off of people going to see that animal suffer in captivity, then there's something wrong with that. I think we can both agree on that, though, right? That we're both against zoos.
No. Well, no. I mean, I some of the stuff I'm saying here is like it's like a gray area. Like I obviously do support certain animal sanctuaries. Like I believe Tim's doing a great job, and I support his animal sanctuary. But just in general, like if I was gonna make arguments, I like just kind of. I mean, I could play devil's advocate in a debate. It doesn't have to be my absolute personal opinion and things I do in my life. Like I could, some meat eaters I debate would be like, yeah, I'm against animal agriculture, and then they're eating cheeseburgers or something. So it's like just for the purpose of the debate. I mean, animal sanctuaries and zoos both make money. Not all. I shouldn't say all animal sanctuaries. But if an animal sanctuary is profiting and somebody is getting a job from that, where they can, they're getting money and they work there, and then they go, support their own family with that money, that's benefiting off of animals. They're exploiting animals for money, but that's fine.
I'd say that there is a necessity for it. Like they're not doing it. There's a necessity for the animal. Like you can't save an animal from an abusive situation and then just put it out to fend for itself. That's unfair. And these people take them in, but you can't just do it for free. So people donate to the sanctuaries and stuff, but it's different from a zoo. That you're not like having people come look at the animals live in these like concrete cages and shit that they stole from the wild. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to put it in the human context again.
Yeah. Well, without putting it in the human context, like if you're making money off the animal, like you have a choice to do that whether or not, right? You could say, well, I'm going to work part-time at this other place, get myself money, and then go help out when I can at this place for free. Like you don't have to be like, I have to work here full-time and get a wage from it. Right?
Yeah, but the thing is, the sanctuary that I go to, they use the money that's donated to them solely on the animals. They don't use it on themselves. They don't use it to like pay rent or anything. They have jobs and they work at these jobs, and then they work these jobs for the sanctuary. But a
Yeah, I don't know
zoo
if that's
is
all,
like the
though.
job
Is that all
itself is the zoo.
sanctuaries, though? Is that all sanctuaries, though? Because I don't think that's
It
all
should be.
sanctuaries.
It should
Yeah.
be. If it's not, then I'd consider that a zoo.
So we can agree that if you make money at a sanctuary that you use for other things than the animals, then that's bad.
Then that's immoral.
That's exploitation.
Then I wouldn't
Okay.
even call it in a sanctuary.
Okay, that's good. What about so what about this idea though? So your sanctuary involves you are helping weak animals and basically trying to fix weak and sick animals. Now, if you look at how an ecosystem works, weak animals die, right? And so when hunters are hunting, like say, human hunters, they're killing the strong animals and they're weakening the species. Now, when you help out weak animals, that's also weakening a species, wouldn't you say?
I'd have to think about that more honestly, but I'd put myself in that situation. Say, if I were a weak animal, I wouldn't want somebody to just let me die.
I think
It's
that's a
virtuous
problem
to
though
help.
right now with if I was to put that in the human context, I mean obviously like hospitals and all these things can be beneficial and everything, but in the human context, I believe that's a huge problem with like the government and everything is that they really overdo it by helping I mean, it's different for humans nowadays. So like weak people would be people who don't even help out with society whatsoever. Like basically lazy people, right? And they're giving handouts to people who could be doing something, but they're just choosing not to and being lazy. I'm not saying people on disability or things like that. So I think it is a human problem too, that people overhelp weak members of society when they could be helping them in different ways. And that's kind of what they're doing with animals. And what happens is then if you help out all the weak animals that should have died, then there's the potential for overpopulation. And then that's when other problems come in where now they're trying to kill as many of these animals to bring that population down. And then this one's overpopulated. And basically human tampering with animals has screwed so many things up. Can we agree with that?
I can agree with that. I don't think that human tampering with animals has screwed it up in the sense of us trying to help animals. I think that when we try to help animals genuinely and for the benefit of the animals, it is a net positive. But when we fuck with them, like with animal agriculture and with like cutting down their natural habitats and shit, then clearly that's not a good thing. I'd have to actually see statistics on that, though. If you
Is leaving animals alone, helping animals, isn't that the best way to help animals, is just leave them alone?
Well, not if they're suffering.
I have some questions from the chat, if you don't mind me interjecting. Is that all right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So Chris Hines says, here's a question for you all. Almost every dog in the pet trade is unnatural. They're basically all man-made creatures that have never existed in the wild. Just because they now exist, do we have an obligation to continue their existence?
We don't have an obligation to continue their existence, but that's why I'd say that we should take in the ones that already exist and take like an antinatalist point of view from it. Like, don't encourage them breeding somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand possibly with animals like breeds like pugs. You can literally never have a healthy pug. They've been bred to have skin problems, breathing issues, bone problems.
We absolutely should not let them.
We have the German shepherds who have the hips problems, boxers with heart issues. It's genetic now. So I can understand with that one. But why would you say? Because we're putting this a lot in the human context. But in the human context, Logan definitely, for example, and I'm sure you as well, Blue, deny antinatalism as something that we should practice. Why is it, would you say, that it's different for animals? Is it because we cannot tell what they truly want? Is it because we cannot bond with them like their own can? What would you say makes it different, where we can no longer reject the antinatalist position?
Can I give my response first?
Yeah, because you mentioned the antinatalism, so.
So when you have a pug and it's going to have a kid, you know for sure that that dog is going to come out a pug and it's going to be fucked up. It's going to have issues. It's not going to be able to breathe well. It's going to have skin problems. And if you have two humans who have Down syndrome, and you know for sure that that kid's going to come out with like some sort of issue where their existence is just suffering and it's terrible and they're going to have skin issues and they're not going to be able to breathe too well. I wouldn't encourage those two people to procreate because their children are going to come out fucked up. I'd say like adopt a kid, and if that's something that you can do with your disability, then raise an adopted kid who is healthy. Don't bring a kid into existence if they're not ever going to be able to function on a tolerable level.
I would reject that because so many people with Down syndrome advocate that they are happy even with Down syndrome, and I think the happiness can't necessarily be confirmed by what disorder you may have. Like you may come out.
I guess I'd reframe what I said. Not necessarily Down syndrome or something where we can actually understand the person, because I do think that you can be happy with Down syndrome and you're not going to suffer your whole life. But like two people who have suffered their whole life, who can't breathe well, who have all these problems, and just their existence is horrible. I would not encourage them to procreate if they are positive, or if we are positive, like we know definitively that their child is going to come out fucked up like them.
Okay, so finally, would your position of like antinatalism towards the pets only be really applicable to those breeds that do have these genetic issues? Because there are a lot of breeds that, though they have changed over time, they still don't really have the genetic issues. Would that still apply to them?
The
Like,
difficult thing about it is just the pragmatic issues. Like most dogs can't survive out in the wild. Cats can, mostly. But most dogs, if you put them out in the wild, they're going to get mange, they're going to starve to death, and they're going to freeze and die in their sleep. So I wouldn't encourage dogs that would be fine otherwise coming into existence in a world that isn't suited for them, pretty much, because we've bred them pretty much to be dependent on humans and to be stupider and to act younger throughout their whole life. You can like go back in the genetic lineage and check it out and stuff like that, but I'd support it for the same like in the human context. If you're like in a war zone, if you're in like a war-torn area and like you know that you're going to have a kid and that kid's going to have like a 90% chance of dying from the war, then you probably shouldn't have a kid until you're in a safe place to have a kid.
Okay. Logan, your position?
So you're saying these dogs can't survive in the wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they were genetically bred or they've adapted to not being able to live in the wild, they can be genetically bred and able to live in the wild by reversing that and doing it in the opposite direction, right? So if something can be made to not be able to survive out there, especially with technology getting better and better, why can't they just do it in the opposite direction? But my whole stance anyways is that you shouldn't be messing with anything like this. Like there's so many problems out there that you or me or Blue or anybody, like we didn't create all of these problems, right? One of the best things that you could do is just not try to mess with anything. Don't try to exploit animals in any way whatsoever, and spend your money wisely on things that you could support. And if somebody needs your help and asks you and whatever, and you can evaluate the situation and help a certain people, you should definitely be responsible for your own situations that you create, right? So if I have a kid, obviously I should be taking care of my own kid, but I'm not obligated to do anything really besides pay taxes and look after my own family. I'm not obligated to do anything. And the best thing that I could do is pick and choose like the best things that I could help out, spend my money wisely, and just share information. positive information with people. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I didn't create this dog situation, but I think it could be reversed the other way. And I just think tampering with things, trying to figure out, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? It's a problem, right? Like it's either you're tampering
I think that it's a nuanced thing in a sense. I wouldn't ever want to support dogs to continue existing as pets. Like I'd take your stance, like we should probably go back, but from that point of view, I think that the dogs that already exist should have the option of going into a home that'll take care of them because they can't take care of them themselves. So I'd kind of ask along the same line of reasoning that if you support sanctuaries because they take care of animals in their best interest and they don't profit off of them, they get money and they spend it on the sanctuary alone or whatever, why don't you support the same thing for dogs until dogs stop existing, like what we say with these chickens and stuff?
Okay, so there's things about a sanctuary that's different, right? So an animal, let's say, I mean, it's going to be dependent on a whole bunch of things. So an animal goes into a sanctuary, they're sick or whatever, they're dying. If you're making that animal have more of a pleasant time while they're alive, like say they got a broken leg or something, and like you don't let the animal breed, that's a definite thing. Like you don't want to be giving some 80-year-old man who's sick, dying of cancer, who's an alcoholic, Viagra, and then he could have kids, right? It's like it's like that's he's not able to have kids for a reason. So you don't want all these sick, dying animals having kids and stuff like that. That's a big thing. But if you're just like kind of like euthanizing them, where it's like I'll give you a more pleasant time until you die, I mean that's potentially fine. But then let's say you have a pet, like you have a pet. What are you doing with that pet? You got to bring that pet outside on a leash. Now you put that in the human context. Is that something that you would appreciate if you're being brought outside on a leash, right?
You don't have to walk a dog on a leash.
You don't
like, okay, I don't always walk my dog on a leash. Sometimes my dog just walks beside me. If she goes too far ahead of me, then I'll say, "Come here, Ruby," and she'll come back to me. And we let them run around in the backyard and in the park and like all these places that they like to go.
So you're saying you taught your animal how to come here. You know, people teach their animals how to roll over, lay down, beg for a treat. That's all exploitation, right? So I mean, it's not vegan to be exploiting animals to do tricks for your own enjoyment either.
I would interject because I see dogs almost as children because they are, like, in the sense they don't really understand the world around them. So you are the person who's responsible for them. And, you know, when you tell a dog to come here, it's for various reasons. You know, they've gone too far out. There's the road nearby. There's another dog incoming. And if they, have a bit of a scuff, then you'll end up with a court date. So for me, I wouldn't say, okay, well, telling a child, come here, you know, like trying to get them to behave and trying to get them to like learn stuff. And I wouldn't say that's exploitation. I look at it from a child perspective because they don't understand the world around them. So you can't just let them do.
A child grows up and learns specifically your human actions and grows up and then basically becomes you, right? A dog will never do that. A dog is just your permanent slave forever. A dog's not going to outgrow that and become a human. A kid will outgrow that by the time they're, a teenager, if they're smart enough. There's some dumb teenagers out there, but they'll know how to look out for traffic. They'll know how to do all sorts of things that any other human would do. And that's just, growing up. And just like a dog would grow up in nature with his dog family, by the time he's, not a baby dog anymore, he's going to know what to do out there. Now, should you put limitations on the dogs that are out in the wild?
He
Why
wouldn't
wouldn't
though. Dogs that are out in the wild, dogs have been domesticated. Dogs that are out in the wild are like wolves and shit, and stray dogs.
Yeah,
But they're these
stray
dogs. Like if you're gonna find puppies in a dumpster, you're just gonna let them rot there.
Yeah, stray
No,
dogs.
I'm just
You know, when
saying
you go to, sorry, when you go to countries where dogs are just stray by norm, they're filled with mange. Their skin is not okay. They've got Demodex, you know, things that you can't cure once they have. They've got
Yeah.
injuries. They're starving. You know, so I understand. You know, don't continue breeding them. But what I'm
yeah,
puzzled about is what we do with the animals that exist now.
Like we've made this mess. We have to deal with it. We shouldn't just let dogs die out on the street.
yeah, but
We
then
have to
you're
use our better
continuing the
judgment.
cycle. Well, no, okay. Well, I mean, but you're continuing the cycle then of just basically, like I said, bailing them out or whatever. Let's put that in the human context. So you have African slaves, right? They were exploited. People, let's say you couldn't understand their language, period, right? Like they speak a totally different language. You don't know what the heck they're saying, and you know, they have these basically the same thing. So the black slaves are just being exploited like animals by breeders and whatever, right? And they're in these, you know, pet stores, but they're black slave stores, like how they auction off slaves. So you get one and you go, well, I mean, I got this black slave here from a sanctuary or whatever, and like, you know, he doesn't know any better. I got to put him on a leash so he doesn't you know, go crazy in the streets because he's not house trained, and you know, all these things. If you put that in the human context, that would seem disgusting to do all those things to a person, to teach them tricks and beg for food and do all these things. Everything about it would be absolutely disgusting, but it's okay because it's an animal. And oh, we bred them to be you know, not be able to survive in the wild, so I can make that excuse too. Well, we bred these black slaves, they can't make it on their own, so it's okay for me to just, you know, do this to them.
Well, it's a practical reality that they can't survive on their own. It's not just I'm making this arbitrary distinction. Oh, we've done this for so long, so it justifies it. I'm like, as a pragmatic reason, we can't just send them out into the wild because they're all going to die.
Why can't I say that about black slaves? That's this. I could say the same argument.
If they can't survive on their own, if they don't know how to feed themselves, then yeah, I'd say keep that person and make sure that they're well fed.
Yeah.
That would be neglect. Like, you think of all the chihuahuas, think of all the smaller dogs that would be incapable. Think of the older dogs. You know, loads of even rescue dogs, you know, the older unloved ones, the ones that are blind, deaf. Like, what do we do with them? We can't. We would have to. We would have to, if we wanted to implement, you know, to stop breeding, we would have to put a ban on certain dogs, like, you know, like pugs, for example, that just cannot be healthy. A flat out ban.
Can we just go over things that we agree on first before we? So, is keeping an animal in your house slavery or not?
Is that a question to me?
Anybody? I don't know.
Oh, I would depend on the house. Say if you live in a 1-bedroom and you're out all the time, you have a work, you know, you have a full-time job and it's just you.
If you're vegan gains.
Well, yeah, I look at that and I think that's cruel because I don't see the stimulation that could be had by, you know, an animal or two. But if you live in a really big house,
but hold on, aren't you just arbitrarily? You're just arbitrarily picking a size though. You're saying,
well, no, because
if it's one room, it's too small. Like, what is the size where it constitutes slavery and it doesn't?
Okay, so I'm not very good at knowing, like, so I'm guessing, right, my house, right, it's probably 20 foot from here to here. Yeah. Okay, so my house would be too small. Okay, so say for an average sized dog like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, a 1-bedroom house, I would have an issue with, you know, especially someone like me who goes to work. I don't think it's just a case of just the size. I'd have to take into account the size, the is there a backyard? Is the person at home a lot of the time? Are there multiple dogs? Are there multiple people?
Don't you see how that's arbitrary though? Like
It
where?
might
Like
be
how is that
arbitrary, but,
room?
like,
How is
but
that determined?
In the
how is
best
it
interest
determined?
of the dog.
It would be depending on the size of the dog, depending on the activity level of the dog. Is it a younger dog? Is it an older dog? Like, I know it might be arbitrary, but I feel as if these things do change whether or not something is taking into account the well-being of an animal. If you have a small house, tiny house with one person, one dog, the person's always out to work. I think that's a huge difference, though it may be arbitrary, to living in a 8-bedroom house with 10 people who are always there, with another dog. I think that's a huge difference. It might be arbitrary, but
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you came to that conclusion, though, that is like the set. It's like you're saying like this is a set rule, but it came from nowhere.
it's not a
Like I
set
don't
rule.
get how
It's
you're.
what it wouldn't. It's not a set rule for me. It's what makes me think whether or not it's good for the well-being. Like, say if it's just one person and one dog, I would see an issue with that, because what happens when that one person has to leave? Like, if there's more people, there's less of a likelihood of that dog being left alone. And with dogs, if they're left alone for 5 minutes, it's longer in their from their perspective.
They don't
And
have a future concept, so they
yeah,
think it's going to be forever.
So those things, they might be arbitrary, but they do affect how I see it, because I'm seeing it from like a real life point of view, where, okay, I'm one person, I'm going to have to leave the house at some point, but if I live with multiple people, is
Yeah.
this dog going to be left alone?
I mean, I get what you're
that
saying. I just don't know how you determined that one is slavery and one isn't. Like it doesn't seem like any specific reason.
I don't get what you
Besides
mean
there-
by slavery. Like, what am I
Yeah.
making my dog do that makes it a slave?
Well, I mean, what is he's trapped in your house? He can't get out. He does whatever you say, whatever. Like
I mean,
I,
when they have the
Not
option
I don't
to
know
leave, like,
what else
say
a slave
my
would do.
see my dogs, for example, my parents' dogs, right? The
You
doors
could
left
say the
open
same
all
thing
day,
for a
and they
hospital. You're just keeping slaves in a hospital. They don't let
No,
you
you
leave.
can say that.
Why not?
Well,
Well,
no, that
I mean,
they're telling you what to do based off your illness or injury. They're not telling you what to do just for the sake of it.
well, we're not telling. I wouldn't say we're telling dogs for the sake of it what to do. I mean, it's maybe in some aspects, you're telling them to sit because you want them to do a trick and please you. But I think in other like perspectives, you're telling them to stay at home, or you're telling them to come here, because there's a
Get off the
dangerous
bed.
situation.
Don't eat that. Don't sniff that. Don't do this. You're telling
Yeah, don't eat
animals
that
to
'cause it's
do
an avocado
stuff
or
all the
something.
time. Like
Yeah,
all the
but
time, you're
a lot
telling
of the time
dogs
it's
not
for
to.
their own good. Like, yeah, don't eat that. That's an avocado. It will kill you if you eat it. Like, like you can't communicate it. But no,
Well, I mean, and plus you're going to everybody goes to sleep right at nighttime. Like a lot of these animals are nocturnal. Like, I mean,
what dogs?
they're okay. Well, I mean, but still, it's like what
Oh, you took about their own.
determines the size, and there's no solid where you could say, well, this is fine and this isn't fine. So there's no determining factor that determines like how big of an area they should have. Like I know you could send in these animal things or whatever. What are they called? The animal control people, and they go over and look at your house in extreme cases. But
I mean,
it
when
just
you
seems
have
all like arbitrary.
Can I butt in here? Can
just
I
one
butt in here real
second,
quick?
1 second. I just want to say that with rescue animals, I don't know if it's different in Canada, but in the UK, if you want to rescue an animal, you have to have the people come around your house and evaluate the size of your house. They have to evaluate whether your house is secure. They have to evaluate how many people are in the house. Like they go through all of these things. Like these things that I'm saying are arbitrary. Okay, but the things that you said that are arbitrary, these are things that rescue centers actually measure in order to determine whether or not your home is suitable and whether or not you're suitable.
Mm-hmm. Where'd
Like,
they get
they
their
look at
guidelines? Those are arbitrary though too.
I don't
It
know
correlates to the well-being of the animal.
Based off of
Can
what?
we both agree that a little Pomeranian living in Vegan Gaines' apartment isn't going to be happy like a dog that's living on like 50 acres of land would be?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is something that's arbitrary. Like, you're basing these off things that consider the well-being of an animal. Is this place too small so they can't move around? Yes, that's not good for their well-being. Is it large so they have plenty of room? They have plenty of area where they can do whatever they want? Yeah. Does it have a garden? No. Okay. Well, then their well-being is not good because they don't have more smells because obviously they're driven by their noses and senses. Oh, are there people in the house? How many people? Oh, just one person. Okay, well, then they're going to be lonely if this person's absent. I wouldn't say these are arbitrary. These are general things that you would
Well,
count
those are a lot of
even in the human
assertions,
context.
though. Those are a lot of
Even in the
assertions.
human
They could do
context.
whatever they want. They can't do whatever they want.
I didn't say. Did I say can do whatever they want? Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. The only time they could do whatever they want is.
Yeah. Well, stop. I didn't mean to say that. That's fine. But
yeah,
they can. When I tell my dog not.
Huh?
Isn't that the idea of slavery? Is that you could do? I mean, you can't do whatever you want, and you haven't done anything wrong.
If my dog wants to go eat the light bulb that is lying on my floor, I'm not going to allow my dog to do that because it's going to die. Like, it's going to destroy his
he shouldn't be in your house in the first place to eat the light bulb.
Well, then where should he be?
Well, I mean, like I said, if we go back to the initial problem, that shouldn't have been created in the first place.
But the issue
then
is
it should be.
They exist. It has happened, and we need to clean up the mess. How else are we going to do that? Are you proposing that I go release my dogs into the wild?
I think even cleaning up people's mess is tampering and not even fully understanding like what the outcome of what you like. People look at short-term fixes and not long-term fixes. And that's a big problem for the planet, is because it's just continued tampering. So it's like, I do something bad. Now I got to fix it. Oh, I screwed it up by trying to fix it. Now I got to fix it even more. Now I got to fix it even more. Instead, you just stop tampering with things. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, we could stop tampering with things, but the problem is, like, they're sentient creatures that exist now. Like, what do we do? Like, what do we do with the millions that exist currently? I mean, your argument I could see existing, like, 40 years from now, where all these animals, say if we stop breeding right now, but as you said, like earlier, it could be more of a vegan thing where we phase it out. So maybe like 100 years, best.
I'm not necessarily saying that anybody has to do anything. Like I said earlier, I don't have to do anything. I have the opinion of myself that, for myself, that I just don't have to tamper with anything. I don't have to fix these problems, and I don't have to, and I'm not going to do anything negative because I don't even know if me trying to fix this by saving animals is even going to help. It might temporarily help an animal, or it might even, make it worse over long term. So I'd just rather do nothing.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying that you're obligated to do anything, but it shouldn't be a bad thing to have somebody try to clean up the mess that we've made.
Could be, though. Could be long term. That's kind of what I'm driving at.
But how do you know that? How do you know that it's a bad thing to not let a dog rot in a dumpster?
Well, the things that, no, you're saying dumpster now. That's different. But what we were talking about earlier was sanctuaries, shelters. There's probably other places you can get animals from that I'm just missing here. And all those are contributing to all the things that I named already. If it's a carnivore, you're going to have to buy animal products. If it's or an omnivore too. If it's like a if it's an omnivore too, like you're taking animals. Yeah, I mean, like, has it been 100% proven that that's a proper diet for a dog? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just asking. I have to look into that. But is that 100% proven that you should be feeding a dog an entirely vegan diet? I know there's cases of animals living a long time, right?
So with dogs, they're omnivores. They can sustain on a vegan diet.
They're not obligate omnivores.
Yeah, so you can obviously.
Mike the Vegan did a video on it.
Yeah,
It
it's very
seems
different
like
with
another
cats,
thing, though,
but-
like you're not asking the dog, right? That's another thing that you're just assuming that the dog wants, right?
You're not asking the cow either.
Well, you shouldn't even be doing anything with a cow. What are you doing with a cow?
To kill it to become dog food.
Well, I'm not saying give the cat. I'm not saying give the dog cow. I'm saying don't have the dog.
I have a few comments from the chat, if I don't mind talking through them.
Yeah, sure.
I've got three comments, and then I've got one question. Okay, so the drunk vegan says my mum's cat has the ability to leave whenever she wants, so equals not a slave. Mike on Raw said more thought needs to occur beyond this discussion, but at least a discussion is happening. Ethologic says the optimal solution for dogs and horses and many animals is a mutually beneficial relationship with humans that put the well-being of the animals first. And Jack James says, are you guys mostly against classifying pets as chattel by law? I probably pronounced that wrong.
Okay, so that first thing I could respond to is like if you feed an animal just in the wild, like they're gonna keep coming back to you, and that's a bad thing. It's not a good thing because they'll die, right? They'll think that you're gonna keep feeding that animal, and they're just gonna keep coming back for you for food because they're not that smart, and that's not a good thing. Just because an animal comes back to you because you fed it, that's still tampering. That's not like. I can't see that as not slavery. Like you just let a cat go. Like it depends where you live too. Like are you like where should cats live? Where it's just like you have a cat and you just let it go outside? Because I know people do that here and it's absolutely freezing outside and they die in the wintertime. And it's like I mean, do they have to live in just extremely warm climates all the time? Like that's the thing I got to look into. I'm not sure about that, but there's so many issues. Is like, it just because it's coming back to you, that doesn't mean. I mean, if you fed a homeless person over and over again, and he just was coming back to you to get food from you for free, is that better than you teaching him how to survive on his own? No, right?
Anything to say to any of those comments or questions, Blue?
I didn't really catch them, honestly.
Okay, so I'll say them again if that's all right. So,
Okay.
Drunk Vegan said, my mum's cat has the ability to leave whenever he wants, so not a slave. Mike on Raw said, more thoughts needs to occur beyond this discussion, but at least a discussion is happening. And Ethologic said, the optimal solution for dogs and horses and many animals is a mutually beneficial relationship with humans that put the well-being of animals first.
That's what Vohan said about the not slavery thing. If you're acting in the best interest of the animal, like if I know that if I let my dog go outside wherever she wants, then that means she's probably going to get hit by a car, then I should not let her do that. It'd be irresponsible of me. Because she isn't able to determine whether or not she wants to get hit by a car. And the second one, more thought needs to be done on this. I think that Logan and I agree mostly. I don't think that dogs should continue to exist. I think that the solution to that is where we disagree. And then Tim said mutually beneficial relationship type thing is having humans help out horses and animals like that, did you say?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I don't agree with the continued procreation of them, though. Like, we shouldn't keep them going for the sake of having them interact with humans. It'll do what it does. If horses want to have horse kids and go live in the wild, then they should do that. But did somebody ask a question?
Yeah. Someone asked a question. Yeah. So I'll ask this question. Then I've got a hypothetical for you both, and then I've got a question for Logan that is a bit more confrontational from the chat. Is that cool? So the question was, are you guys mostly against having animals as chattel by law?
Having like, animals that what?
As chattel. Chattel, maybe. It means property.
Oh.
So is that just your main argument Is that someone was asking that? But
The animal shouldn't be property?
just shouldn't be property.
I don't think that they should be property, but I think that people should be responsible for them and use their better judgment. Like, I
So,
don't
like,
think that somebody who
incest,
has
guardianship.
livestock animals should be allowed to open the gates and let them go drown in a lake somewhere, you know?
Okay.
Treat them like kids. Like,
So more like
species
sorry,
is
guardianship,
irrelevant.
like Tim said, like guardianship.
Hmm?
Would you say like guardianship?
I would call it guardianship. I don't even agree with calling it a pet because I'm not keeping my dog solely for my own benefit. It does benefit me to know that I'm benefiting this dog, but I don't keep the dog for the sole purpose that the dog is going to make me smile. I keep the dog because I know if I let her go run out on the streets, then she's going to die. And I've just kind of built up a relationship with her. I've connected with her.
Okay, so I've got another question.
Could I answer that question though? Like, let me, so about the thing about it, oh, it makes me happy too. Like I've heard this a lot. Like, oh, it does make me happy that I own or that I have a pet. You know, people want to they play word games too. Like they want to say own, and even though everybody else in the world says own, but as soon as they turn vegan, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't own them anymore. I just have them and they're my friend and whatever. And it's the exact same situation, but you just change the word for some reason. But then, like,
I could explain that if you want.
Okay, well, yeah, just let me finish the point here. So then you got to look at the pros and cons of what's going on too. So it's like, it makes me happy, you know, I take them for walks and it's all this enjoyment for you. But then it's like you don't know how the animal feels. So it's like a huge positive for you, but then it's like a maybe for the animal. So the pro for you is definitely outweighing the maybe, right? Because they could be pissed off all the time inside that they are inside you know, their hearts that they have to stay inside all the time and do all these things that you say and whatever, and they just have like they're institutionalized, right? And yeah, I was gonna say something else, but you go ahead.
The reason why, well, the language for me never really changed. I never said that my dog is my property. I think that you can't own a life, and the difference is that I'm putting my dog's well-being before my own. If it was in my dog's best interest to release her out into the wild, then I would do that, but it's not. And I can tell that because if I release my dog out into the wild, my dog is gonna die. And what was the second thing that you can't tell if they're
You can't tell how they
happy?
feel.
I can't. And my dog could be sad a lot of the time. But the alternative is letting my dog rot. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Let me ask you this: did you have your animal spayed? Or I don't want to ask you a personal question, but are you in favor of having animals spayed or neutered?
I don't know, honestly. If it's, I think that if there's a way to keep them from breeding without interfering with them, interfering with their reproductive organs, then we should definitely do that. But if there's not, I don't know, because I wouldn't want that to happen to me. But I can use my better judgment to know it's probably like a better thing to not have them continue breeding until we can't control their population and all the problems that you've
okay, so
brought up. Like, there's a lot
of
thinking to go into it.
Yeah, either you pay somebody to mutilate their genitals, or you risk potential of taking them outside and then they mingle with other dogs and, you know, hump when you're not looking, like in the park or whatever. Like you're taking them on a walk and dogs are like, oh, look at your dog, look at my dog, and then they hump each other or whatever, right? But like, then you have to like be worried about taking them out to see other dogs and do this and do that, right? So it's like it's a negative either way. It's like you can't mingle with other dogs, or I have to chop your nuts off.
I'm not sure though, because somebody to do it. I don't know if you've seen dogs mate, but it's a very long process. Like the humping is like about 30 seconds. They have about 30 seconds before they join and not, and then they turn around and they do that for 30 minutes. So you can't let them go. But it's very rare if you're being negligent of your animals and you're not watching them and you don't you don't have a secure border around your house, then I could see why you
Mhm.
would need to spay and neuter. But if you're someone who's
Yeah.
careful with your animal, you look for your animal. The humping thing isn't something that, and they have to be in season as well. Like really,
Think
a
about
lot.
that. Think about
Yeah, a
that.
lot
You're
of
not
the
letting your animal have sex now. You're not, now you're saying you are never allowed to hump another animal without
well,
my
they hump the leg.
permission. Now
They hump the
that's
leg.
absurd too.
I mean,
Mm,
they can have
Sorry, what?
sex if they were paid.
they can still hump. I
Well,
mean,
it's not, yeah,
My dogs
not as
hump each
fun.
other sometimes.
I mean the
And they're both girls. What?
when dogs actually have sex, it's a very painful thing. Like with cats as well, more so with cats. But it's actually
Why
a
is
really
it painful?
Well, with dogs, when they mount, they join each other. So like, I don't want to get too graphic, but the penis basically goes in the vagina, then it knots round, and then they turn over, and they stay there. And if one of them decides to like walk away from the other, they will rip their genitals. It's a very risky process. And with cats as well, the way the cat penis is shaped, it's like a spike. It's horrible. But yeah, I get what you mean. It's a natural thing to want to procreate. So I see what you mean. But are we okay to move on to some questions?
I
Sure.
feel like I don't know. Like I haven't expressed myself in the best way I could have.
What for that question?
Just kind of for everything, because I see the same goal in mind. I don't think that I just think that people should behave in the best interest of the animal, and I don't think that the best interest of the animal is just letting them die, is letting them rot in a shelter and be euthanized or whatever. Like it's a much better life for an animal to come be accepted into a family and go play in the park and like eat dog food and treats and shit than it is to like die in your own excrement in some shelter somewhere. But I don't agree with the shelters either. So it would be phased out like you said, but I still don't agree with letting animals die. I don't think that we should pay for them. I don't think that we should support their continued breeding, but if it were for the ones that already exist, they should be able to go live somewhere where their best interests are taken into account, like what we do with animals from animal agriculture, and we put them in sanctuary. And that's kind of how I see it with people who adopt dogs from responsible shelters or who just take them off the street and cure them of their diseases and just have a mutually beneficial relationship.
I think a massive
If you
issue with the
cut-
relationship. Sorry, you go.
If you think of it this way, like if over 70% of the animals in shelters get killed like in the shelter, then only like, under 30% are actually getting adopted by people. Then how many of those are just being, let free outside or neglected or getting, run over by a car or like just like the people are dickheads, right? Only
Yeah.
like most like even a lot of vegans like are dickheads, but like it's gonna be very few people are treating their animals like gold, and it's just like for the purpose of me just taking care of you, and it's all about you and this and that. Most of the time, it's just gonna be dickheads kicking their cats and being get out of the way and blah 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 and forgetting to feed them and just all sorts of crap, right? So they're probably not even
that should happen.
and then they're trapped inside a house on top of that, right? So it's probably like a very small percent of animals that are actually having a good life. So in my opinion, it's probably better to just try to end it all like quicker than as quick as you can, because there's just going to be more and more animals being bred and bred and bred and bred and it's just the same thing with animal agriculture. They'll just be breeding them more and more, and then there's just more suffering.
Yeah, it's the pragmatic part is hard. But if you are taking a person with the best interests of the animal in mind. Like me, I like to consider myself somebody who cares a lot about my dogs, and I comfort them and stuff, and I give them a good home, and I take them out to play and do a whole bunch of stuff with them. What about those people? Would you still call it immoral?
Sorry, I missed that last part. There's a meat eater who wants to debate. Do you guys want to do that in a bit, and we'll skip the insects part?
What does the person want to debate about?
He's actually from a previous debate a long time ago. His name's Bronson, and he was on the 3-on-3 debate there with me, Chris Hines, and I think it was Planton. No, somebody else. I don't know. Could have been Planton. Yeah, it was Planton's channel. S3 versus 3 meat eaters. He was one of them, and he says he's got time right now to talk.
Yeah, we could.
So
I just wanted to say
thought that would be interesting. But we could wrap this up. Whatever.
We could 100% do that. Yeah, cool. I was just gonna say, I think with certain animals, like say cats, I think it becomes a difficult argument because obviously we have to feed them meat, which is contributing to animal agriculture. But with dogs, they're a very different animal to any other animal really that we could possibly own. Okay, like dogs, they heavily when you look at dogs, have you ever questioned how when we have dogs, the way they behave with other dogs, it can be very hostile, it can be very immediate, right? But with people, that they're a lot more positive, and that might be, or maybe it's an authority thing, but like some of the evidence, and I could send you one about the recent one with the brain scans. They rely on us heavily, human beings. Like they see us and they see us, and the reward part of their brain just shoots off. Like they rely on us for a lot, like almost like a child. The communication between dogs and people is extremely different. And I would say that that's something that's very valuable, not just to benefit people, but the benefit of dogs. I just think it's one of those things where, yeah, okay, they can't communicate in our language, so we don't know if they like what we're doing. But I'd say the same. If me and a Spanish person were sitting in a room, and we were just like playing chess or something, and I couldn't tell if they liked it. Like if you studied people, if you studied dogs, you could tell there are ways to tell whether or not they enjoy what's going on. I just think the massive issue is that we don't understand the animals we have. We literally have no understanding of what they want, what they need, when they're not okay. Like some people do not realize that, say for example, like when their backs change color, some people don't realize that that's their fur. They're in a defensive mode, and it starks me when people have dogs and they don't realize a simple body language that is going off. I think that's
and when their ears go back.
Yeah,
can I make an argument real quick?
Was that an argument for having pets though? I don't know.
No, it wasn't.
It
wasn't an argument for having pets. It was an argument that I don't think. I think the main issue currently is our ignorance towards animals. I think if we knew more about animals, if we had to know more about animals before we even thought about having them, and that's why I think rescue is so good, because you do have to know about animals before you have them. If you don't know anything about animals, they won't let you have them. And that's why I'm so against breeding as well, because anyone can have them. Anyone could take them off for baiting. People don't just own dogs; they just use them for fights and stuff. So no, it's not necessarily an argument for having pets. It's just an argument that maybe having pets isn't the biggest issue. It might just be our ignorance towards animals and our need to self-serve.
So if the answer is we don't understand, we're ignorant, basically you might be making the wrong decision, so you should really be doing nothing. Is kind of what I'm
unless you know. Like I know a lot about dogs. I've had dogs since I was I think I was 7. I've looked into dogs, studied dogs. I always used to read books about them. Like I do know a lot about them. I would say if you knew enough, you had the room for them, and you had the time for them, and the patience, to not be able to like punish them in a negative way. Like someone was mentioning the whole. Well, no, because no, you shouldn't. You don't actually need to. For example, a dog. You don't really need to punish them. Positive reinforcement works tons better. And anyone
I don't punish my dogs, and I never have.
Like and anyone.
So all of these arguments you're making, though, could be used in the sense of black slaves. Everything you just said, you just insert black slaves instead of dogs. Same arguments, right?
No, it's not.
Not really. Why
not?
That's what I was about to bring up. If it's okay if I say something.
Well,
Sure.
if I just respond to that, I would say it's not the same because slave. I wouldn't. I'm still not convinced that just because you are keeping them in an area that the dog is a slave. I'm still from the position of a child in the sense of you understand. And that's why it's important to have responsible dog owners or guardians, whatever you want to say, because you know more about the world than the dog does. You know about road sense, you know about people. Are they going to take the dog and harm the dog? The dog doesn't know that. It's like a child. They don't understand that other people might harm them or take them away and bait them. They don't understand roads and.
The only reason why the dog needs to understand roads is because you took him and put him in your house where there's roads in front of your house. He doesn't even need to know that.
The only other alternative is either killing them, like not breeding them in the first place, which is probably the ideal, or setting them free where they probably wouldn't be able to survive.
Maybe eaten by a
coyote. Take out the word kids and dogs. All those things could be said still about black slaves. I don't know. I don't see why you can't see that. I could say all the same things about black slaves. They can't survive on their own. They don't know about cars yet. We didn't teach them, so it's like they're not smart enough.
No,
and you're not getting at the right thing here, because if that black slave was brought up to be dependent on another human being, then you probably shouldn't send them out to get hit by a car. You shouldn't have kept them to be a slave in the first place, but we're dealing with the mess that we've made. You're making decisions in the best interest of the person. And what I was going to say a while ago about dogs is a pragmatic argument. It has to do with their biology, in the same sense that the slave argument has to do with this person's dependency on humans. Dogs have been bred to be dependent on humans, which doesn't justify the continued breeding of them for them to be dependent on humans. But it means that if you send them out into the wild to fend for themselves, then they're going to die. They are not going to be able to fend for themselves. They're not going to be able to find food easily. They're going to get diseases. They're going to get sick, and it's probably going to fuck with the other animals around them. It cannot be good to the ecosystem to introduce an animal that's not meant to be in that ecosystem. So the solution wouldn't be to send them out into the wild or to let them all die, because letting an animal die is unethical. The solution would be to take them into your home, reduce the populations until they're basically non-existent, and then there aren't dogs anymore. And then you're done.
And Logan?
So not letting them all die and rescuing them, that's a short-term fix. You will eventually kill more animals by putting a Band-Aid on the situation temporarily than just ending it all completely and just not doing anything.
Okay. Now, so we're moving on to this person?
I don't know. I gave him the link here. Give me 1 sec here. I'll just see what he's saying.
You want to maybe have like a new stream?
Yeah, you want to do that?
Do a new stream.
Wait, hold on 1 sec. I'll just see what he said. I'll just see what he said first here.
Okay, so while you're speaking, like sorting it out, Logan, what I'll say to everyone, because some people did want to get involved in this chat, what I'll do tomorrow, or maybe at a time that's agreed upon by everyone who wanted to join, I will have another stream on this same debate on the pet ownership, and we can talk it through, because obviously some people did want to join. A lot of people have opinions on it. So we will just have another one where other people have a chance to speak as well. And anyone who wants to hash out a bit more can. Because I think what we might be doing now, Logan will confirm, is opening up another stream for a debate with somebody else. If that's okay, we can, with you guys, we can do that. It would probably be tomorrow night for the pet ownership debate again on my channel, and I'll open it up to absolutely everyone.
I don't know. This guy's not answering yet, so we might as well end the stream and then we'll figure it out.
All right. So
in a
we'll end
little
this
bit.
stream. I'll open up another one. And then yeah, we'll go from there. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. Please get involved in the next stream that will be happening, I imagine, very shortly. And until next time, we'll see you soon.